A word from our sponsors. Today's marketing leaders need more than dashboards. They need answers. That's why Zeta built Zeta Answers. It replaces guesswork with strategic control so you know where to spend and how to grow. It gives you customer foresight using predictive AI to target intent before it happens. It delivers full funnel clarity, tying media to real outcomes, online and off. It puts on-demand intelligence in your team's hand, no dev tickets, no delays. And with live campaign insights, you can optimize while campaigns are still flying. Zeta Answers doesn't just measure outcomes, it drives them. See it in action at zetacmo.ai/answers. Again, that's zetacmo.ai/answers.
All right, welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. This is Erin Paparo. I'm joined by Eric Franchi, and our guest this week is Erin Foxworthy, who is the Global Head of Marketing and Advertising at Snowflake. I find Snowflake to be a fascinating company, making sort of a jump from a commodity database company into something much larger, an actual platform that people build on. And I had a chance to talk to Erin at Cannes. I was really fascinated by what they're up to. So I thought she'd be a great person to bring here to kind of give us the DMP, CDP, data warehouse, state of activation kind of point of view. Eric, what's your perspective on this, on Snowflake and this general subject?
Yeah, I mean, Snowflake is a super important company. There's like so many companies that they're talking about their Snowflake instance, and they're, available in the Snowflake App Store or whatever their version of it is. So it's like one of these companies that looms large over marketing and advertising, but isn't necessarily like a media company. So it's super fascinating.
Right.
And then Erin's an OG. She's been at this, really long time and has a fantastic and interesting background coming from like entertainment. Then she was part of the, golden day of Microsoft in advertising and has agency experience. So she brings, I think, like really, really good perspective on a topic that's like somewhat complicated, right? Like data.
Yeah. It is. It's very complicated. And also worth noting that Dennis Buckheim, who probably many people know and I think he's been on this podcast before, he was also just hired by Snowflake to be effectively Erin's counterpart that sells to publishers and the sell side.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're really staffing up some heavy hitters.
Yeah. Dennis was the former head of the IAB Tech Lab, I think.
He was. And before that, he had a senior position in Microsoft Ads.
Yeah. Awesome. Congrats to him. This is going to be a great one.
Yeah, it should be a really good one. So I'd also recommend listening to this Monday's podcast with Ramsey McGrory, who's the new president of Prisma within MediaOcean. He tells us about how the innovative integration's working, a bunch of other interesting topics. So with that said, let's dive right in with Erin Foxworthy. All right, we're on with Erin Foxworthy, the Global Head of Marketing and Advertising for Snowflake. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you and I sat next to each other at dinner at Cannes. And so for all the PR folks who constantly email me to get on the show, that's the secret, I guess. Just get the right seat at dinner.
Pick the right seat.
It was really interesting. There were a bunch of Snowflake people at this dinner, and I've always been really interested in this company because we did a massive migration at Beeswax to move on to it, and it seemed like there was more than just a database, more than just a platform, but something a little more interesting for the advertising world. So we wanted to talk to you about what you're up to and what Snowflake's up to, and why it's interesting, I guess would be the real question. So let's just start with why you decided to work at Snowflake. You had this background at Horizon Media and advertising, and now you went hard tech. How'd that happen?
It's an interesting story. So early in my career, I started on the media side. So agency girl, kind of starting right out of college, and digital, actually right out the gate. So I won't date myself, but that was a long time ago when budgets were like 1% of a media plan. And I live in Los Angeles, so I ended up working a lot in the entertainment space, media and gaming, where it was a lot of kind of what we called early days, like spray and pray marketing, right? We would just do huge reach buys all the time. And I worked in that field for quite a while in Los Angeles. I got recruited to Microsoft. So I went into a very similar role I have now. It's called category development, which was a little bit of deal, like sales support, a little bit of product support, and then a lot of also product marketing. So you kind of sat as this semi-expert across all three and helped kind of drive the business forward. So this is when the Equaniv acquisition was coming in. So this was at ECN, this was Wrapped. This was when you started to see Microsoft kind of think about having the pieces of really kind of becoming something amazing. Scott Howe was there. So really kind of amazing time to be at Microsoft. Obviously, the rise of Bing changed a little bit of the direction that Microsoft was at the time. And so I had to make a decision of what I wanted to do next. And I already told myself I would never go back agency side because I live that world. That is a tough world. And I didn't want to do it. But I got this amazing opportunity at Horizon Media as an independent to basically start an incubator in their Los Angeles office, or a big client they just won. And the premise was to take an entertainment client. Was a brand new client. It was a brand new company. It was called STX Entertainment. No legacy data, no infrastructure, and to think about how to be more data driven for a typical company that didn't have a lot of data. And so it was a really interesting journey because we were coming in through the paid ad space. But what we found in a lot of our testing, between starting with third-party data, then going to second-party data, every single, no matter what platform we were doing any type of data-driven targeting and media, first-party was always the key. Whether it was lookaliked, it was a seed, not a surprise. But we didn't have a lot, right? So we were striking deals, second-party deals. And what we realized is that what we're going to have to do is start to think about building more first-party data sets. So that's natural for a retailer, natural for a company that's first-party rich, right? Not necessarily natural for companies that don't have it. So that got us into the world of the DMP. So we were really early customers in the DMP space because we were taking cookies and segmenting them and driving them in the ecosystem. But that got shut down from the walled garden. So all of a sudden, our DMP wasn't helpful anymore, and we needed to migrate. And the problem was, so I was responsible for that my team, that DMP review. None of the tag management of the data we had for 2.5 years was portable.
Right, because it's all web-based and cookie-based.
Web-based, right? There was nothing durable about it. So obviously the portability clause that we had in the contract didn't even matter. So we had to rethink everything. And I remember, I'll never forget it, I actually almost got fired because we had lost this company's entire segmentation first-party data strategy when we wanted to move to a different technology. So luckily it wasn't. And I sat down with some of the team I had, amazing team at the time, some data engineers and data scientists. And they said, you know what, let's think about this different. What if we think about having identity stored in cloud storage, bringing it into a data warehouse, and then giving us the flexibility to never have this happen again, right? No lock-in, right? We can take it in, build it into a durable identity. It's our segmentation, our audiences, our BI tools. And so that's what we did, right? And so they came in and said, oh, Erin, this really cool warehouse called Snowflake. It's blowing up. It's super fast. It's separated storage and compute, right? This is where everything's going. And I said, okay, I trusted them. I'm like, let's do it. Let's find out. And so we heard all these awesome benefits of what Snowflake was doing. And they were already in the ad tech space. Some of the early customers were in this space. So we started to build that. But then what was happening is we were also testing AMC and ADH and FA. We were testing all the clean rooms. And then when I saw Snowflake released with Disney and NBCU a clean room infrastructure, I said, oh, it has all our first party data. It's already segmenting. And now it has the ability to have secure collaboration. This is going somewhere. And so that's when I started. This was 3.5 years ago. And I was perfect time, perfect moment. There was a position open to kind of call on agencies in the buy side.
Let me run you through my narrative of this evolution, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. And we had Matt Katz on this a while back to talk about mParticle and their evolution. So I want to hear your version, which is you start by saying, hey, I want to collect all this data. And so you have DMPs, and DMPs, like we just discussed, are effectively cookie stores. And even for privacy reasons, DMPs actually would say you cannot store any customer data in our system. It's just anonymous cookies. And that was the wrong bet. And then step two is consumers say, well, I need a CDP. A CDP is effectively like a DMP, except it uses actual users instead of cookies. So you have all these identifiers, and the CDP offers a bunch of services like BI, but also privacy, a bunch of other stuff. And then some folks say, and not everyone, I mean, CDP is a giant category still. Some folks say, well, I want the source of truth to be a data warehouse I control, and I'll rent out the parts of it that I don't do, like the privacy controls, et cetera. And that's what people called a composable CDP. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what's happening is that Advanced marketers and agencies are realizing that owning that data foundation is the key and that SaaS can come to it. You don't have to move it and then you don't get locked because the black box, the lock, like all the words we use to kind of describe happens on the MarTech side as much as it happens on the ad tech side. So I think that if you can own your key customer data, right, whatever that data spine, whatever that core infrastructure is, and now what happens is you can pick best of breed applications to come to that. We call it data gravity. Some people call it composable. Right? There's all these ways to think about it. But what I don't like about the word composable, at least from a Snowflake perspective, is that someone says, oh, I connect to Snowflake, so I'm composable. In our world, the SaaS application actually lives in your governed environment. It comes into Snowflake and sits on top of your data so that it's fully composable. So it's an application that lives within the governed bounds. We call it a connected or a native application that sits within Snowflake. So it's actually within your governed environment versus sending a copy of the data to a platform that now is doing, whatever it is they do within the application, segmentation, downstream.
So speaking beyond Snowflake, you're bringing up kind of another really big trend, which is this idea of non-moving data, or maybe there's a better technical term for that. But the idea being like in an old world, if you want to use platform X, your first step is to take all your data and push it to platform X. And that goes for everything, goes for every segment on the Lumascape. There's a new trend, which Snowflake is a part of it, but we don't want this to be a Snowflake commercial. We're trying to talk in general, which is, leave your data where it is and bring the app to you. So what are you seeing there?
I mean, that's in the 3.5 years I've been here, it's the biggest trend that we're seeing. I mean, it's a constant conversation of, I need to rethink my entire MarTech and AdTech stack. And I have a data set that's sitting in a data platform that's super powerful, performant. It can house all this data at scale. The last thing I want to do, and there's a couple ways to think about it. When you get into the data engineering org, it's efficiency. I don't want to maintain 100 APIs, and every time I do, it's a copy of data, and it's expensive. Egress is expensive, right? Data going in and out can cost money. So how do I do it from an efficiency perspective? The other piece too is what you just said is when you get into compliance in the security office, right? Especially in regulated industries. This is where they're like, I am not allowing you to take that customer data anymore and ship it off to, right, a SaaS application, an identity provider. They're going to cut it up and then they're going to send it out to the endpoint, like that we're not moving it anymore. And so there's two things that Snowflake helps with, or cloud in general kind of helps with. Is the first one is that idea is that SaaS is an application that's built on a cloud infrastructure. It can now live on top of your data set, again, in your boundaries of security. The other part is what you hear a lot is Snowflake just calls it a data share. So in the cloud world with collaboration, that just means you're basically exposing a view of a table to another party. So it's access to actual view where they can query it, right? But actually not take possession of it in any way. So they can basically query the data. It's live, it's cross-cloud, it's real time. So as the data changes, what they're querying, they see those changes automatically, but it builds into the table all the governance. So if I said, you can't see this column, you can't see this row, you can't see this, I'm going to mask this specific object. We have all these interesting controls in the table so that when they're querying it, they can't see what you said they're not allowed to see. So it's a really efficient way of collaboration without actually making a physical copy. So that's where you hear a lot of this like non-movement of data. It's that idea of applications coming, but it's also like when you do collaborate, there's a way to do it without actually fully making a copy and losing kind of that governance and control.
If I'm looking to activate my data like through a DSP, like the Trade Desk or Google, et cetera, is it possible to do that without moving the data? What's the current state of play for non-moving data? If you were to have like a matrix of here's my use case, here's how far along I am of being able to do it without moving my data. Can you speak to that specifically about activation?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple I can talk about publicly. So this is actually something that the Trade Desk worked on us quite a while ago. So we have a first party pipe that comes up. We call it a pipe. It's not technically a pipe to Trade Desk seat through a data share. So if you want to actually expose a table to Trade Desk, they can actually query that data from Snowflake and land that in the seat without taking a full copy in possession. So we've actually created a lot of those type of integrations, not only with DSPs, but also with a lot of SaaS like MarTech applications like CDPs. So we have quite a few AdTech and MarTech partners who will take a data share as a form of activation from Snowflake. If you want extra, I know you're going to ask me about this, if you do want extra privacy controls where there's not even a view of exposure, now we're talking a data clean room.
Yeah. Is a data clean room a thing or is it a feature? Like it sounds like you just said earlier that you can make a given row available or a column available to a partner. How's that different from having a PET layer in front of a
Great
row
question.
or a column?
So really for us, a data clean room is an advanced data share. So what it has is specific features like aggregation and projection constraints. So basically you can't query under a certain threshold volume. So what we do is on top of that data share, we basically inserted code that gives exceptional, like very specific types of ways that prevent certain queries from running to give you protections. But that's what's interesting about data clean rooms. We call it a product, right? People say I have a data clean room for a Snowflake. A data clean room is literally, right, just extra features as part of that data share. Now we bought a company, Samuha, as you know, that allows for a UI layer to make it easier to use. But underneath the hood, really it's Snowflake data sharing with extra PET enhancements, right? That's the difference between a data share really and a data clean room.
And back to that trade desk example. So the client's not moving their data. The trade desk gets a view into the data, and probably they're copying it or matching it with their IDs so that they can run it efficiently. They're not doing like a real-time lookup. That would probably not make sense. So there has to be some sort of translation going on.
Yeah, there's a so it's obviously it's a hem and a made, right? So there's an identifier that's within the view that's allowed that to make the match.
And do the customers have to know how that works? Or is, I'm just very interested in what parts they have to compose and which parts other people compose. If I'm a first-party data owner and I have a whole bunch of data in Snowflake or another data warehouse, do I also have to rent some sort of identity spine, or can my activation vendors do that work for me?
So it depends, right? If you have a first-party data set where you have those identifiers, obviously, depending on what the end platform takes, some of them say, I'll take a hem, I'll take a made, I'll take an IP address. So you're deciding that. Other times, obviously, if you don't have those identifiers and you do enrich, that's where we get into kind of this concept of, right, identity resolution. But here's what's interesting. So go back to the data gravity applications, and you kind of heard this announcement with us with Axioms, whether it's Axiom or Merkle or LiveRamp or TransUnion or name a lot of our identity providers. They've built applications to come on top of that first party, resolve the data in your environment so you don't have to make copies, and then activate. So if you do need it, the nice part is that they're bringing that resolution now, at least to your first party data set versus you sending it out, right, to their platforms. They're cutting it up, they're resolving, and then they're activating from kind of their infrastructure.
Yeah, that was going to be my next kind of area to ask you about, which is what is the agency's role here? What data are they owning, and how is that changing over time?
So in the world, so I obviously work with a lot of agencies. There's a lot of different takes here. On the big holding companies, a lot of them own their own identity assets. So they're able to have their own first party data, enrich it with their clients, right, in privacy safe ways, and kind of build audits and segmentations. And that's kind of feeding into these large platforms they've built, right? So Interact from an IPG example, or Blue, which is Horizon's platform, as another example. So they'll have identity kind of baked into, so they have graphs, right? They're baked into kind of powering the structure, right, of their platforms. A lot of times that are built on Snowflake. So they have their own data assets. There are some smaller agencies, though, that are saying, I'm never going to actually own your first party. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work out of your ad seats. And I'm going to take the data, right, and I'm going to out of the exhaust that comes off those ad platforms, and I'm going to build audience segmentation and think about planning in aggregate. That I'm actually never actually testing your first party data. So I see kind of different routes, right? Some agencies saying, I don't want it, don't ever give it to me. I can make decisions without you handing me the first party data. And then I have others, right, that have the infrastructure to actually create their own first party data assets. So different kind of ways of thinking about it.
Right. They're right in the middle of this question about whether you move data or not. And they're also a data owner in many cases. So it gets pretty confusing. All right, so we have to talk about AI. We should get some theme music whenever we're ready to bring up AI. I keep hearing from folks saying things like, "Well, everyone's got AI, but we have the data, so that's what matters." How are you seeing your customers think about the data in a data warehouse as it relates to AI and what they're bringing to the table?
Yeah, this is interesting. It's happening really fast, but I would say people are really just toe tapping at the beginning, which is, not a surprise. I think where a lot of agencies started in AI was Google has a new Gen AI feature in platform. I'm going to use it, right? A lot of it happened on the creative side. In more of the data side, it takes a lot more effort, frankly. And I think so what you're seeing is that the agencies that have kind of worked on building that data foundation we talked about. So if you're bringing all that data in, right, you've created, right, a schema that allows you to organize the data, and then you've created a semantic layer. So just think of a semantic layer as like a business layer on top of the data that allows you to think about what that data is. Now you can start doing AI on top of that work. And so there's a few agencies that had that organization of the data, right? There's this one we talked publicly about, a small one called Power Digital. So they actually they're an e-com agency out of San Diego. They had, hundreds of clients, mostly D2C, and they were bringing in that data into Snowflake, right? And organizing it across all those buys. And they were able to quickly start to build AI on top, where they built a chat agent that was able to come in and say, a marketer could come in and actually ask questions of, how's my meta campaign doing today? What does this benchmark look like? What are the ads that are performing today? So instead of going in a Tableau report, right, their marketers can now actually ask really intelligent questions. And the nice part about how I think Snowflake thinks about AI is that we bring the models inside of your governed infrastructure. So what's nice is that you're not making a copy, again, of data out to an LLM. The LLM has to come to you and can only train on the data that you have inside of Snowflake. So again, we have that governance feature, and then you get to pick it. So you can actually see like what's the right LLM to use, what's going to give me the most accuracy, what's the cost implication of that specific LLM. So we built like a full service orchestration to help you, right, decide on how you use, right, AI and AI layers into your data sets.
You have a CEO that is the former head of ad product for Google, Sridhar Ramaswamy. I was curious to see, since he's been in the seat, it's probably been about 3 years now, right?
Oh, he's been there for 3 years. But I think CEO for like a little over a year.
Got it. Have you seen any evolution in how you work with marketers and the media ecosystem just with his influence?
I think that the interesting thing about coming to Snowflake is that, media and advertising in a cloud organization is one piece of a huge narrative, right? Like what we do within retail and financial services and all these other verticals is deep and wide. And so when you think about marketing and media and ad tech, it's important, but it's definitely not the only part of his day job now.
Are you saying marketing isn't the most important part?
Right? Like it's the center of our world. And it's so interesting in the cloud infrastructure because it's definitely not all we think. But to that point, yes, right? Having him, obviously, the company and understanding kind of, I think the challenge is that it's an ecosystem, right? This is a buy side, sell side ecosystem, and not everyone understands that, right? So what we do on one side affects the other and vice versa. And I think that his understanding has helped us think about product integrations, what we purchase, how we think about organizational structure to solve those challenges. So that's been very helpful, definitely at senior leadership, that they understand the complexity of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I actually overlap with Sridhar quite a bit at Google. They used to have me and the other DoubleClick people try to give him advice about stuff, and he was very polite about not taking it. So I appreciate that. All right. Well, Erin, thank you so much for this. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with our refresh news of the week. This podcast is brought to you by AudioHook, the leading independent audio DSP. AudioHook has direct publisher integrations into all major podcast and streaming radio platforms, providing 40% more inventory than what could be accessed in omnichannel DSPs. What's more, Audiobook has full transcripts on more than 90% of all podcast inventory, enabling advanced contextual targeting and brand suitability. AudioHook is so confident that in addition to CPM buys, they offer the industry's only pay-for-performance option, where brands can scale audio and podcasting with peace of mind knowing they are only paying for outcomes. Visit audiohook.com to learn more. That's audiohook.com.
All right, we are back, everybody, with the refresh. On the docket for this week, what do we have? Some big news out of TTD, a brand new RMN. I think this is RMN number 426 or 427. Some AI news. Actually, big breaking news raised out of Substack, maybe a couple other things. We have some time. Let's talk about TTD. But before that, actually, we have a correction. Ari, you want to take it?
Yeah, just a quick, we get things wrong here a lot, and we try to be very, very aggressive about, well, I get things wrong. You do your research. So last week, minor flub, we talked about Catherine Perloff's scoop about AdX staffing up to help their SSP business, and we attributed it to Adweek, where she used to work, but she has moved on. She's now at The Information. So she's doing great work there. So thanks, Catherine. Sorry for the misattribution.
Yes, thank you. And Ari is sorry. Okay, let's talk about TTD. So earlier this week, I was on LinkedIn and I saw a post from Jeff Green announcing that the trade desk has been added to the S&P 500 and the stock shot up on the news. why does the stock shoot up on the news of being added to the S&P 500? One large reason, one major reason, because once you're added to the S&P 500, which is the most popular index across 401ks and all these passive vehicles, funds need to buy it. So it is kind of front running the addition, which happens, I think, later this week with people, kind of arbing a trade. So that's why the stock went up. It is now in the low 30s or mid 30s. I'm sorry, mid 80s versus being in the mid 70s last week. So that's a great thing for TTD holders. But I think it's like pretty cool that there's a pure play ad tech stock in the S&P 500. Like, sign of legitimacy for the industry. I mean, definitely sign of, I think, legitimacy for the company. And it's like an awesome thing. I should also note that Snowflake is and has been an S&P 500 company for some time. But this is awesome. Congrats to TTD. What do you think, Ar?
Yeah, my only concern is why they weren't added to the SP 500 Plus, which is a totally different product offered by Trade Desk. So
it was written. It was foretold.
It was foretold, SP 500 Plus. One day Jeff Green can hope to reach the heights of App 11. I think that he's got a goal.
Yeah, for sure. In the meantime, congrats to Jeff. This is also, I think, there's like an interesting maturing going on right now at TTD. The other thing that he posted this week was that a couple of longtime execs are exiting. And he said it was like, very intentional. We're saying about it, 2 Trade Desk colleagues who've worked there for a decade now. The chief commercial officer or the chief client officer and the VP of customer success. So it's just kind of interesting if you take a step back, right? Like inclusion of, to the S&P 500, longtime execs leaving, feels like, some sort of changes in the air at TTD and largely positive. So congrats to them.
Yeah, I think they're consistently the most interesting company in ad tech as well. You can second guess a lot of their moves, but they tend to have a good result, so it's hard to second guess ultimately. But you could say they should do more M&A, they should expand beyond open web advertising, they should stop with the TV operating system, they should blah, 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 blah. And, only time will tell.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk RMNs. Who had HP on their bingo card for launching an RMN? Erin, what'd you peg the odds at prior to this week?
Yeah, it wasn't me. Definitely low odds on that one.
What about you, Ari?
I mean, HP tends to be pretty aggressive with their ads, their data use, their terms of service, and all this. There's 2 HPs, right? This is the one with the printers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Also, the number 2 PC maker.
Yeah, right. So I'm not that surprised, honestly. I mean, they've been, when you get a new printer, you have to sign your life away just to get ink. I don't know how effective the actual ads will be. I'm going to take us off topic for 1 second. Have you watched this season's Black Mirror?
No, I've been told that I must.
I watched one last night. It freaked me out. There's this episode with Rashida Jones where a corporation takes over parts of her brain and starts having her speak ads to everyone she talks to. And, everyone in ad tech should watch that one. It can't be worse than HP.
All right. It's on the list. Why is HP doing this? So, as I said, they're the second largest PC maker, second to Lenovo. So maybe Lenovo is next. Big audience. So global audience of 830 million people across 100 million devices. In the US alone, 160 million monthly people across 19 million devices. So they've got the scale. And how this is going to be manifested, according to the news, is ads are going to appear on HP laptops and in HP apps. Somewhat harkening back to the days of you want to say it, Ari?
Are you talking Gator and things like that?
I'm talking Wenyu
and Gator.
I'm talking Gator, like something installed on your computer and you're running ads. But in this case, obviously it's the manufacturer themselves and they've got the consent from the user. But it's a little bit of Back to the Future.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has pushed in this direction multiple times over the last 20 years where they've said, well, we're going to put an ad here and there on the operating system or the start menu and stuff like that. I don't think it's ever been a meaningful part of their business so much as the homepage of MSN on people's browser was a huge business. So there isn't a lot of evidence that you can make a pre-installed apps advertising, scale and be a really good business.
Erin, what do you think coming from the Microsoft heyday?
I was going to say the same thing that Ari said. I remember them trying to actually have inventory within the Windows ecosystem. Obviously, they had to be really careful from consumers' feedback, but it never got traction or scale. So it's going to be really interesting to see if this does.
I'd be very interested in knowing if you buy an HP laptop, if they claim ownership to all the data. Like, are they sniffing every single browser URL, whether or not you've opted in, or maybe you've opted in but don't know it? That's where I think a red line could be crossed that I wouldn't appreciate personally. And it's sort of analogous to your TV. When you buy the TV, pretty much the TV manufacturers know what you're watching. It just feels very different on a PC that the browser or another piece of software within the PC might also have sort of data leakage to the owner of the device.
So Lauren Johnson from Adweek, shout out, wrote this article. Let me talk about data for a second. HP's ads can be targeted by device data, like when someone uses their PC, what apps they use, their email address, purchase history, and location, according to the pitch deck. For example, HP can identify people who have downloaded tax preparation software or someone who spends more than 10 hours a week using conferencing apps. So
yeah, it's not that bad. That's not as bad as it could be. It's not URL level, and it's not the data in the apps.
This is correct. And it's also desktop only, which is, quite limited and not necessarily the fastest growing market per se. That said, apparently this comes from a pitch deck. They're planning on some fast product, but unclear if that's just like more video inventory that runs on the laptop.
Yeah, can you uninstall it? Can you do a wipe of your device? Are they subsidizing the device and then preventing you from getting kind of the root level access that people expect on a PC? Those are pretty interesting questions also.
I'm just thinking for like gaming clients, that could be really interesting. Or just a lot of clients who are dependent on desktop.
Yeah, in gaming, I had a company on here called Overwolf, which is effectively like widgets on your desktop that like leaderboards and stuff like that help with PC gaming, and it's actually a really big business funded by A16Z. So that's an interesting play as well.
It's interesting. It's final point on this. It does feel like this is the logical extension of what we're seeing with the CV OEMs, all, building their ads business and taking advantage of the fact that they've got, kind of locked in real estate. This is a PC version of this. So again, does Lenovo do it? Does Apple do this?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But there's also an interesting contrast with Chromebooks. So Google is a pretty big manufacturer or licensor of operating systems because of Chromebooks, but their strategy has been to go low cost, students, international. And I think it's a data collection play, but they don't monetize it. They don't monetize, no ads on the Chromebooks, but maybe an independent Chrome thinks differently about that.
Okay, let's move on to some AI stuff. So a couple of interesting hits here. So according to the IAB, who released a report this week, nearly 90% of advertisers will use Gen AI to build video ads. If you read the Marketecture newsletter this Monday, this would not be a surprise to you, right?
90% surprising. I think that, the horses left the barn, as it were. The video models have gotten so good already that it'd be crazy not to at least try them and see what you could do.
Yeah, to be clear, the 90%, they didn't give a time frame for that. Where they did give a time frame for, basically buyers said that nearly 1/3 of their creative currently is built from scratch or enhanced using Gen AI, and they expect that to jump to nearly 40%, again, building from scratch or using Gen AI for video next year. So it's up to 40% next year.
Yeah, and the point I made in my newsletter wasn't my best newsletter, to be frank, but every Monday it's a lot of work. And I'm interested in your point of view on this, Eric, which was Gen AI has gotten so good so fast that it makes you think that maybe there's not an opportunity for vendors in the space because you could use the raw power on your own, more or less. And it feels more like the analogy I made was Microsoft Excel, where anyone can use Excel for anything, and you don't need another layer on top of it to make Excel do the thing you wanted it to do. What's your hot take on my hot take?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be the power of the model. I think it's going to be which models perform the best and give you the best creative. But what I think a lot about is just someone who lived in this world is the traffic in that creative. the trafficking, the ad ops, like how do you get the ISKI code to the right platform, to the right, like that's the stuff I'm also interested in, like who's wrapping around that piece of the Gen AI, because it's great to create it, but you got to actually, right, traffic it out to endpoints and get it into production. And I'm kind of curious more about that than I actually am of the Gen AI itself.
ISKI code, blast from the past.
Sorry.
Right? Come on, we're in ad ID land, and the answer is ISKI codes got replaced by ad IDs like 30 years ago.
Yeah, from my perspective, similar to Erin, I think that if the value prop for a company or a startup is, produce creative using Gen AI, I think it's going to be very tough given the off-the-shelf tools. And, obviously VO3 is, the best example out there. But we're seeing companies, and again, sort of what Erin said, what they allow the AI produced creative to be done, right? Like how you provision it in a multivariate way, how you deploy it omni-channel, how you then optimize it, how you use it for, driving purchase behavior. There's tons of opportunity there. And those are companies that, we're looking at, and some of them are growing quite fast. So I don't think it's a category that's like DOA. And if, you read your PSAR, you might have gotten that impression, right? It's like creative is uninvestable. I don't think creative is uninvestable, but it's how it is incorporated into a larger offering.
Yeah, I buy that. I think that creative plus ad network makes sense. Creative plus trafficking maybe makes sense. There are definitely places for it.
Does creative become part of the DSP? That's the real question.
Historically, creative has never been part of the DSP. Right. No, I don't think there's a single example where a DSP offered creative services and it worked. So I'm going to go with no.
Erin, hot take?
I'm going to throw back a question. Like, have you seen anyone have concerns around if I'm using this model within this environment, a YouTube environment, I'm using this model within Meta's environment, I'm using this model in the DSPs, they're not all the same models. Like, you want brand consistency, right? It's such an important part of a brand's IP. I'm curious how people are controlling that, right? So if you don't have one central model that's actually the voice of your creative, how are you controlling for, brand sustainability across all these platforms?
Sounds like a startup idea right there. Call it brand alike or something like that. AI checks your AI creative to make sure it's brand safe.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So my answer to Ari is like, will creative become part of the DSP? Is like, well, if you look at what Google is doing with PMax and what Meta is doing with Advantage Plus, they're already connecting creative to media and optimizing it and creating like incredible outcomes, right? So there's a check in the for column there. But then on the other side, because these are siloed, you risk that brand consistency. You risk, having all of the brand guidelines upheld across platforms, which is why the client base for these products are performance marketers or SMBs. And that's why a lot of people are somewhat bearish outside of, this, hey, is there a way to do this across platforms on, these set it, forget it performance products really being meaningful for brands?
The feature I would build if I was running a DSP would be a sort of a checkbox, very simple option that automatically, created an AI generated creative or multiple and did an instant A/B test and took 3 to 5% of the traffic and ran it with a creative that you didn't come up with and saw if it worked and gave you visibility into whether it worked or not. Because I don't think you're going to be able to convince people. You need to actually just do it and see if it works.
Agreed. That's a great idea. Okay, let's talk about a company that's not an ad tech company that we talk about every week, OpenAI. This will be just a quick one because I think this is like super interesting. So they're working on an integrated checkout experience, according to an article this week. So you will ask about a product. It will surface a recommendation. It will allow you to buy that best recommendation while never leaving OpenAI. That feels big. That feels like funnel collapse-y. That feels like the ability to build a big, to your point, as you said before, Ari, many times, affiliate business on these LLMs. Like, I think this is something.
It sounds like something. I think OpenAI just, I think we covered 4 or 5 months ago on this pod that they put out a new product called Operator, which was like a headless browser that would let an agentic agent shop for you. And we looked at that and went, that doesn't sound right. And so now, not that they're giving that up. We don't have any information about that. But this gives an example of a different approach, which is instead of going out to the web, you bring the web into you. And then there'll be other folks who have shopping experiences that are agentic, but uses MCP to be able to shop your catalog. I think this is a very exciting emerging area. Actually, my co-founder, Ram from Beeswax, is at a startup that is doing this sort of thing, MCP ad catalogs from e-commerce feeds. Let me know if you want a connection to him.
What's the name of the company?
Man, you know how bad I am with names. Don't put me on the spot with names. I'm an investor. I have no idea what the name is.
Sorry, Erin, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I'm just wondering
at that.
if they get into payments, right? Then you start thinking about, is there subscription like a Prime? Is there credit card in the? I mean, there's all kinds of amazing things that could start to do.
Yeah, well, Shopify is the connection point. So it's integrated with Shopify, and Shopify's obviously got the payment data. So yeah, goes big.
Octogen, like Octagon with a GN
cool.
at the end.
Very cool. Nice. One more thing. I saw this week. We should drop this in the newsletter. It's a really long article, but it's apropos of the Cloudflare news where they were, basically like firewalling LLMs from seeing publisher content. This Substack called Digital Digging, which I had never come across before. It had a giant piece about like the 6 different ways LLMs actually bypass publisher paywalls and dropped a pretty eye-opening statistic. Basically, OpenAI's ChatGPT, Perplexity, and xAI's Grok successfully access protected content approximately 50% of the time. So, like, if you think you're firewalling this stuff off or your paywall protects you, the answer is actually no. So, super interesting.
Yeah, I was at the Acquired Live event at Radio City this week in New York. It was fun, the Acquired podcast, for those who don't listen to it. And they had, among other guests, Meredith Levin, who's the CEO of New York Times. She gave a pretty impassioned defense about why they're suing these folks over content. And I like the way she put it, which was they're paying untold sums for compute. They're paying untold sums for engineers and distribution and all of these other expenses, but they don't want to pay for content. And that's not right. And I thought that was quite sharp observation of hers.
Absolutely. Hey, on the subject of paying for content, this is kind of breaking right before we recorded this. Substack announced that they're raising $100 million. From TCG, Andreessen, a bunch of other investors. And on Substack, creators can be paid for their content. So I thought this was pretty neat. They're going big.
Yeah, Substack is trying to create a walled garden, one unemployed journalist at a time. And it's going pretty well.
All right.
Well, let's talk about Clinch for 1 second.
Sure.
So Clinch, I had them on the podcast a couple years ago. They're a challenger, I'd call them, in the buy-side ad server market. Have really nice looking UI that allows you to do dynamic ads and all this other cool stuff. And they are claiming that they're offering a flat SaaS model for buy-side ad serving, which is interesting. Like, is it real? Is it not? I have a lot of experience trying to convert people to flat pricing and not a lot of success, especially at the agency level. So I think this is one to watch. Is this real, or is this just a upstart competitor trying to shake things up?
We are an investor in Clinch, and agreed. The product is awesome, and they've got a ton of momentum. And I'm not, I think, speaking out of turn here or giving anything confidential. It's in the article. We'll drop the link to the Adweek article. Apparently this is helping them win new business, every new business with brands. They're estimating that SaaS ad serving is saving like 30 to 50% for big brand customers. So it's real savings. And the real question is, and Ari, obviously given your ad serving background, even Erin, back in the day at Atlas, moving from usage to SaaS has real big implications. Like, you can put more dollars to work for media. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, devil's advocate would say, like, you could just continue offering variable, but offer 30% off. And so offering flat is basically a sales technique to try to offer a discount, but to lock it in. And there are different models. I just wonder if there's anything really unique here, or if it's effectively a pricing war.
We should have Oz on the pod.
Yeah, Oz is a fun guy. We should have him on.
Want to call it here?
Yeah, sure. So this was a great conversation. Erin Foxworthy, the global head of marketing and advertising for Snowflake. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And Eric, always great to chat.
Always. Thank you, Erin. And we'll see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.